America's oldest known permanent European settlement might one day be underwater. Because of rising sea levels and climate change, Jamestown Island is at risk of having 60 to 80% of its landmass submerged by as early as 2050. What happens to this historic landmark, and what can be done now to help prevent the rising waters? To help shed some light is David Gibbons, the Director of Archaeology for Jamestown Rediscovery. Thank you for coming in today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Just explain to us exactly what is this problem?
Well, it's really interesting. When we first started thinking about sea level rise and dealing with it, I thought, why don't we just hire a bunch of Dutchmen to come in and surround the island with a wall? And it actually turns out the water's coming from the ground up. And so that threatens the archaeology out there.
How does this impact Jamestown specifically?
Well, a lot of what we're dealing with is 4 feet in the ground, like graves, human remains, wells that are 16 feet deep. And so as the sea level rises, it pushes up salt water and other things that we are dealing with in our area.
And you're even seeing the effects on trees already, which shows you how grave the situation is.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So as that's one of the effects, as the salt water comes up, it will kill the taproots of the trees. And then when we get an event like a Hurricane Irene or something like that, the trees get pulled over and they rip up a big section of the ground, which is adverse to the archaeology, the resource.
How many dig sites are being affected here? What is exactly going on there at that space?
Well, throughout the island as a whole, so the Jamestown Rediscovery Foundation and the National Park Service co-operate the island there, co-manage and own the island, and so we're working together. There's 50 some sites, over 50 sites that are threatened by sea level rise and climate change, and so that's a pretty big number for a site that's taken 25 years to dig an acre and a half, and the island's 1,500 acres.
So what is being done now to address this issue?
So we've banded together largely as a state organization, but also within the Park Service, who are our partners there at Jamestown, and we're assessing all the sites on the island and looking at how we can actually, it's a triage process, which sites are in front of the train and most in danger, and which ones can be monitored over time.
What can be done, and can it actually happen that it can be stopped or you can slow it down?
Well, unfortunately, there's nothing we can do to stop it. But what we can do, again, is monitor, mitigate, meaning excavate where needed. But unfortunately, it's a very dire situation.
What other historic areas are at risk?
Well, we know from our colleagues and working with other organizations throughout the United States that there are quite a few archaeology sites at risk. Within the Commonwealth of Virginia, Tangier Island's already seen a little loss of a cemetery, for example. And on the eastern shore, watermen are telling us that the barrier islands are starting to go.
What about Yorktown?
Oh yeah, well, one thing that's very interesting is it's not just sea level rise and inundation. As the land erodes away, the high bluffs, for example, at Yorktown, start to erode. And so that's another thing that I hadn't realized. It affects both high and low ground.
Can Jamestown be gone, in essence, in years?
Yeah, that's the problem, is that when you run climate change maps where that shows a rise of 6 feet, a lot of the island, like right in front of our office, is only 3 feet above sea level. And that's where, for example, John Smith first paraded the troops. They call it Smith's Field. And we're seeing that completely inundated year-round now.
So then what happens to all of the artifacts, to this treasure that we've known here in Virginia?
Well, unfortunately, you have to deal with it and excavate. Now, it's taken us 25 years to dig an acre and a half at the level that the resource deserves out of Jamestown, the James Fort site. And currently we're digging the site of First Africans in the United States, and there are other sites of First Peoples that are absolutely integral to the development of our nation. And that's what's very scary, is that's got to be done.
I know so many people want to get involved now that they know about this issue. What can the public do to help?
Well, I got involved in archaeology up in Blacksburg, Virginia with a local chapter of the Archaeology Society of Virginia. And so when people ask me, how can I get involved? Either they're younger or they're retired, I say look for your ASV chapter. And then with annual meetings, you get connected. It's networking, and you discover where and when people are dealing with some of these sites. And you can volunteer. The crew at Jamestown already has. So
Such an eye-opening interview. It's definitely something we all want to take action with right now. Thank you, David, for coming in today.
Thank you, yeah.
If you want to get involved in fighting the rising waters, go to virginiaarchaeology.org. And for more on Jamestown, go to historicjamestown.org. And I understand that you actually know the person who's featured in our next segment, Dr. Bill Dodson.
I do. So we met Bill. He's a local Williamsburg individual, and he'd come out interested in history and brewing, and we gave him 10 gallons from a 1608 well, and he's brewed something with it.
It is so interesting. As part of Virginia Currents on the Move, we visit Dr. Dodson's 8 Shires Colonial Distillery. It serves up handcrafted spirits the same way it was done in the colonial days. Dr. Dodson was allowed to team up with Jamestown Rediscovery in excavating the graves and the wells from the early 1600s and retrieved glass stills and the last 10 gallons of water within the well. He plans to use those items to recreate history in a bottle. Dr. Dodson is an endodontist who performs root canals by day and gives tours of the distillery at night. In his lab, you will learn the history of whiskey and the process of how he distills authentic colonial spirits and specialty drinks. Let's go there now to raise our glass the colonial way.
Here you go, sir.
So we're trying to cover the history of whiskey in America from 1607 to the middle 1790s. It was just a neat period to cover. Nobody covered. There was no history available, no books written, nothing available. So we saw a wonderfully unique niche there. We started researching it, and it was terrible to find facts on who made what when, and some of the claims were false. In trying to do some of the research, we decided to make our theme colonial. Hi, I'm Dr. Dodson. How are you today? Welcome to 8 Shires Colonial Distillery. When I do tours, I ask people this question: what do you think is the oldest of the drinks that we drink today? Could you tell me? Let me give you a clue. It's either Scotch, bourbon, rum, or gin. Anybody know?
Is it gin?
Very good.
He said he wanted to do something. He wanted to find something to do. I was like, what else are we going to do? Because we've had a fun-filled life. We really have.
My father, who was the first oral surgeon in this area, looked at me and said, well, there's 2 pieces of advice that I can offer you. Retire when you're young enough to retire. Don't work until you're too old. And the second thing is retire with something to do. So we started into it, and some local people heard about what we were trying to do, and this gentleman walked in, Mr. Eisenhart, and said, I understand you're trying to do historical whiskey. He said, my great-great-great-great-grandfather worked for George Washington and made stills and helped repair the wheels for the Whiskey Rebellion. And I had the original patterns for the stills he made. And Mr. Eisenhart in 1750, this is his design for a quick still that could be made for the homeowner. But then another lady walked in and she said, I'm an archaeologist from Carter's Plantation up the road. I have the first still made in America. And even more exciting than that was Jamestown Rediscovery, the archaeologist out at Jamestown doing research on the origins of our country. Walked in about a month later, and they said, Bill, we've got the only 10 gallons of water ever taken out of a Jamestown well since 1609. And they had excavated the well all the way down, looking at the different layers, pulling things out and saying, where did this come? How did the first colonists from England in America use these things? And I said, can I have it? And I know what to do with it. So they were gracious enough to give me that 10 gallons of water. So we're trying to make as authentic a product as we can of what would have been drank by the colonists in the 1607 to 1609 period. So you can actually come over here and look in the tank if you'd like. This is actually a batch of bourbon that's fermenting right now. Williamsburg is a tourist mecca. You come here to find out about the history of America. And we're trying to recreate a piece of that. We love people to come out, support, see, touch, feel. It creates an experience in Williamsburg that you can't find in a lot of places around America.
To find out more about the tasting tours and history, visit 8shires.com.
She's heard my cry one too many times, it's been flying.
This week's Spotlight on Virginia Music shines on indie rock artist Doe Eyes. Back in Richmond after being in New York City, Allie Thibodeau has a soulful and sultry voice that can also belt out her cleverly crafted lyrics. Doe Eyes is Allie's solo project. And in 2018, she launched a crowdfunding campaign to record her debut full-length album, expected to be released soon. After the release, she hopes to start touring again. Here now is a clip of Autonomy. Thanks for watching Virginia Currents. Join us next time for more inspiring stories. I'm Amy Lacey.
Close my eyes and see your face, for I fix you.